All right, good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us here today. We are joined by the Managing Director of Dart Mining, Mr. James Chirnside, and the Exploration Manager, Owen Greenberger. And the gentlemen are here to talk about the announcements over the last couple of days, which is ongoing activity at two of these great projects under control of Dart Mining. I'm going to let James lead off on the lithium project, and then we'll talk about Granite Flat. Over to you, James.
Thanks very much, Pete. Okay, so some people would know that we've gone into a trading halt this morning. We will release further details around that next week, and as they come available. Straight into the lithium results. So we reported a number of new holes results in yesterday's release. It was a pretty chunky release, which I think most people would realise. The idea of the release was to create a context on the recent Dorchap Lithium drilling program, which involved a total of 3,032 metres over 12 holes. So we released some earlier results in June. So in this release, we've got holes 4 and 5. We've got 6, 7, 8 and Rhoda Creek 1 and 2 as new results. And look, the highlights of those results were hole 4, I should say. We had 5.9 metres of 0.81 lithium oxide from 240. But look, I won't labour on these results. What I'd like to do is just remind people of the deal that we've got with SQM, which is a fully funded up to $12 million earn-in agreement. And that we've still got 10.2 million essentially to spend on further lithium exploration. We've got a number of further drilling programs planned for later in the year and early next year. And on that note, I think I might hand over to Owen to get into the detail on the release and the results. Thanks, Owen.
Thanks, James. So the phase 1 drilling is the first foray into diamond drill testing at Dorchap. You might not know there's over 1,000 pegmatite dikes in the dike swarm through the Dorchap range, with the early work having established a 20 by 12 kilometre fractionation zone of fertile lithium. So the first 12 holes tested the 5 dikes we could access by roadside drilling. So we drilled about 3,000 metres. Every hole has taught us something new about the geological context of the system around the widths and grades and mineral geochemistry. So we're building a robust geology model. We've seen a lot of the primary mineralisation being spodumene and pedalites, some really cool geology shear textures that are really building our geology understanding about how the dikes form, where they form, and where we can target some of the better zones within the Dorchap range. The upcoming drilling is testing the Gosport region, which is what we think is the more prospective zone. It's got a lot of smaller, not smaller, but there is an accumulation of dikes in a smaller area that helps with our volume and mineability prospect of the range. So we can't wait to get in there and do some drilling when we're through the planning and regulation stage.
So Owen, with SQM joining you out there in the field, can you describe the sort of experience that you're picking up and the skill set that they're able to bring to Dart? I mean, this is the largest lithium company in the world, and to be focused on a small market cap like Dart's here across this pegmatite swarm must be something very interesting.
Yeah, it is. The sheer number of dikes, the size of the fractionation zone, the geochemistry we've got, SQM really help us with prioritising and targeting and having a real technical oversight on a lot of the geochemistry work and support that we need to do and understand lithium. So it's really great having those guys on board, and it's a vote of confidence that we're in the right spot, having them fund and support us in our exploration activities.
And what's the scale of this area, the swarm? What's the scale of the area that the swarm covers?
So that's well over 50 kilometres long from where we think the source is to the last of the pegmatite dikes. And within that, there's a Goldilocks zone, if you will, of 20 odd kilometres long by 12 kilometres wide within the middle of the Dorchap range. There's over 1,000 pegmatite targets. We've mapped a small fraction of them, maybe 100 or so, done a lot of the initial surface geochemistry work, which highlights the lithium potential in better areas. Interestingly, the diamond drilling into the fresh rock is giving us some elevated lithium grades compared to the surface rock chip sampling, which is opening up new targets that we previously not been particularly interested in, just seeing that enrichment at depth. Lithium's a very mobile element and can weather away very quickly. So the drilling's been pivotal in helping us targeting.
And that was sort of brings another question. The formation of this swarm, how do they develop? And I guess that's what the drilling is trying to give you the understanding of where they're from and where the richer zones might be. How do these swarms typically develop?
So they are released from a granite when they're intruded into the surrounding rocks, and they follow the structural architecture of existing rocks. So they smash through the rocks, they deposit out. When the chemistry, pressure and temperature is right, that's where you get your Goldilocks zones for lithium exploration. So they progress along as they cool, different temperatures drop out different minerals, and you get enrichment in lithium in that Goldilocks zone that we've identified through the chip sampling.
So we're seeing there are some high grades. There's greater than 1% in there, and so that's coming from somewhere. And then there's sort of lower grades, which possibly will be peripherals. And I guess that's this ongoing drilling campaign is going to help you and SQM determine where the richer parts of this mineralisation is going to be found.
Yep. And the lower grade intercepts in some of these dikes is structurally controlled. So where originally it may have had elevated lithium grades, where the structural development of the system breaks down the bigger crystals and releases the lithium into the surrounding rocks. So it's a little bit destructive in some zones, but you can see, say with hole 9 or 10 at Boone's Dyke, it's less structurally involved, and that maintains the elevated grades of over 1% lithium. So understanding the geology context around all of the dikes is critical for our exploration and targeting. So it's definitely a focus and helped by the drilling.
And finally, I've got an image there of the Boone's, Blair's and Ferguson's dikes. Where's the next target for the drilling campaign?
So that's the big red circle with the Gosport group just to the left or west of Blair's there. That's the what we consider the best bit of the project. It's got a higher concentration of dikes. It's got really good geochemistry from the test work we've done. There's another 100 to 150 targets within that zone that we haven't field tested yet, and it's already showing elevated lithium grades from rock chip sampling. So it's a really prospective spot of the range.
And when do we expect that to commence, and how long do you think?
So that'll be mid next year, hopefully. There's some work plan requirements to get in there. We've got to put a bit of a track into access, but we'll be later this year. We'll be drilling in and around that area where we can under the low impact and track work. So we've got a couple of phases of drilling coming up over the next 6 to 12 months.
Okay, thanks. And James, the relationship with SQM, you're happy with the engagement and the liaison you have with them?
Yes, Pete. Look, we haven't had an arrangement. I haven't worked with an arrangement like this before, and I can only say that they're an incredibly principled company. They're very supportive. They're very good at communicating, and we could not be more pleased with our relationship. It's going really well. It's worth noting too that I think that we were behind Wesfarmers and Mount Holland. I think we were their second joint venture partner in Australia. We had actually originally spoken to them about this dike swarm back in 2017. But of course, the lithium price crashed after that, so things went quiet, and then we spent a good 6 months negotiating a deal with them, which we all signed in July last year. So great relationship, good people, really good people, and they got lots of boots on the ground here now in Australia as well. So couldn't be more happy. I'd say just on the Gosports, to reiterate Owen's comments, we've had the best rock chips off those dikes of any. I think, Owen, correct me if I'm wrong, but XRD testing has shown them to be dominantly, or at least I think we've only ever had spodumene off there. So it is prospective. And I'd also just remind people that we're not talking about one dike here, where other projects in Australia, typically are one. I mean, Mount Holland is just one great big slab of pegmatite, which happened to be carrying a lot of high-grade lithium, which is fantastic. We're talking hundreds and thousands of dikes within the area that we're dealing with, and it's complex. It is slow versus having one dike in the middle of the desert versus hundreds of dikes on the ground in mountainous country. The other thing I'd say about the terrain is that whilst it might be a bit of an impediment up front in terms of progress, at the end of the day, you can utilise the gravity effect of mountainous terrain to your advantage in extraction, and it can make it a lot cheaper. The other thing we've got on our side in terms of infrastructure is power. We've actually got a Snowy 2 hydro electric line coming straight through the Middle Valley, as well as a very skilled workforce within 20-30 minutes of the project. So a lot of things stack up. We've just got to find the tons, which is what we've really been trying to identify on this recent drilling program. Yeah. And we know that the chemistry's right, and we know that it's carrying high grade and at depth. So they're the key points, I think, and we've got plenty of cash committed from SQM, and we'll continue. We'll probably, not many juniors drill 6,000 meters, which is what roughly the amount that we've drilled this year. I'd expect we'd be drilling that and more over the next 12 months, both on the lithium and also Dart's other projects where we have our own drill rig, and our costs of drilling are incredibly cheap versus contracted drilling. And we intend to have that deployed 24/7.
Now, there's plenty of action going on for a small market cap in an unusual resources pricing environment at the moment. James, we'll move on to the report on Granite Flat, which is also looming up to be a significant project. I'm just going to share that page now.
Yeah, look, we'll do the same thing here where I'll just introduce the project and make a couple of comments on it, and then we'll get Owen to talk in depth, or at least some depth, on the results, and particularly around the release that we just made. So this is an old project. I mean, CRA first drilled this part of the Granite Flat back in the 1980s. We have since drilled. We've done a lot of drilling on it. I think in the recent the release yesterday, we did our own in-house drilling of around 1,400 meters, and in addition to that, there was a contracted RC program earlier in the year of around the same amount. So this year, just on those two, we've drilled close to 3,000 meters, the RC and the diamond. It's a very complex project, Granite Flat. It's still questionable as to whether it's a porphyry or an intrusion-related bulk tonnage deposit. We have an enormous amount of data, both historic data from drilling and chipping and that sort of thing. We have done a lot of geochemistry work, surface soil sampling. I think we've taken upwards of 7,000 geochemical samples on this project over the last couple of years. On top of that, we've put down 16 kilometres of geophysical lines, and we've got the data back from that. We've done our own contemporary drilling on this project as well. Had some fantastic grades. I mean, off the top of my head, I think our best gold grade was like 19 meters at 9.39 grams per tonne. We've had some big high-grade copper hits from time to time, and but this we probably need at this stage, given the amount of data that we've collected on this project, both historic and contemporary, we really need to sit down and put all that data together and see if there's a story in that, or if there's any pathfinder type indicators that will get us to the next planned drilling program. So we are reviewing a Granite Flat, not with any negative connotation at all, but we've just got so much data and so much history with it that we need to sit back and take a sort of a very considered view of what next. There will definitely be what next. It's a question of exactly what that is. And look, we're on that. I think outside of these two projects, the other one that's really interesting for us is Rushworth, which is out on the plains. It's about 40 k's, and I know everyone hypes it, but it's about 40 kilometres northeast of Fosterville. So it's very interesting geology. It's a historic gold field. It was mined by the old timers who got caught by water, so it was only ever mined to about 40 odd meters depth. We did a LiDAR survey across that project earlier this year, which threw up an additional 4,600 historic workings, all slavishly lined up on strike. And so we've got some work to do there. So look, I might just hand over to Owen. Owen, over to you on Granite Flat and the release yesterday.
Thanks again, James. The Granite Flat's a really interesting one in terms of geology. As James mentioned, we're not entirely sure if it's a porphyry or intrusion-related gold. We think it's a big intrusion-related copper and gold, broad, low-density, northwest trending vein system supported by the RC drilling, which has some really long, low-grade, wide intercepts, like 105 meters at 0.27 gold equivalent. So it's a really big, broad system, low density sheeted veins, so a whole bunch of veins lining up in the similar orientations, with a lot of halos of copper mineralization. But then there's what appears to be a later stage gold, copper, silver rich veins, which is a more structurally controlled corridor of mineralization along the Crawleys and Hoddle lines, which are old mining areas. There's a couple of shafts and adits exploiting the veins, and there's some really quite high-grade copper and gold in those veins. So it's a really interesting part of the world. You're getting sort of 7.9 grams gold, 7.7 grams of silver, and 3.85% of copper over a metre on the hole, diamond drill hole 13 in the release. So some really good results sitting in there. As James said, we've got a stack of information. We've got to finalise a couple of additional drill holes that we'll put in, and then we'll do a full project review and all the geological data and pull it all together and see what comes out the other side.
It's truly a polymetallic deposit, this one, and as you said, it is very interesting. It's got all the ingredients, and so far the drilling is helping you build that picture. Is this the results of a very old deposit that's broken down over time, or are we looking at the outer edges or the cap of something that might have signified a kitchen or a richer source at some stage?
Yeah, it's a really big zone. So there's a 2.5 kilometre soil copper gold anomaly across the surface, which is what was followed up with the RC drilling. It's a really big system that is potentially hiding some better grades within it. It's a really early stage exploration project over a really big scale. So there's a lot more information required, and they're hopefully some more jewelry boxes and an elevated zone of a more dense sheeted vein system that might bring in a bit more bulk tonnage and better grades into zones. So there's enough smoke and mirrors and high grades within the drilling we've got to date that it's still a very interesting, exciting prospect for us. We just need to pull all that data together, analyze all the geochemistry, find the pathfinder elements, and then go out and test what areas that appear to be better grades or higher density sheeted vein systems to try and build that project into something that's mineable.
Well, and on that, it seems there's 200 metres mineralised at a reasonable gold equivalent. Is that starting from surface, and is much of the intercept starting from surface, or do we have to go a bit deeper before we get any grade?
It's pretty much from surface.
Right, and therefore, I'm just looking at some of the sections here. It sort of it seems like a rounded landscape. Is it a large area over which these samples are being derived, which you could formulate some project on?
Yeah, it's a big hill sitting out the back of the Mitter Valley. It sits over an intrusion, so it's pushed all the rocks up, intruded the landscape. And it's quite a big hill. We were up there the other day, and it's a really pretty spot to be wandering around out in the bush. But yeah, it's a really big area and a big system. So we've just got to pull that information together and do some targeting to find out how best to follow up.
The other thing that's worth noting there is that it's actually open both at depth and is it to the northeast, Owen? It still remains open from geochem. So we still have not, nailed down or defined the specific area yet. It's still open. I'd say, just if I may, and I know I'm just conscious of time and everyone's busy, but I would say too that, it's a big project. Some people have said to me or asked me, well, how are you guys going to do that? And actually the reality is we are looking actively for joint venture partners, and we've been engaged with a number of companies and remain engaged with a number of companies on a number of darts projects. So we're seeking farm-in or earn-in agreements, similar to the one that we've done with SQM, in order to, fund more intensive exploration, move all these projects along to their conclusions, whether that be to a mine or whether we, walk away, and that's always a risk in exploration, of course. So yeah, it's not something we need to prove these things up to a point where they are tantalizing or particularly interesting. To that extent, we've just applied to BHP under their Explore program on a couple of projects, and we'll continue to pursue. We've developed some information memorandums on various projects, and we're going to market those out to some of the mining majors and second-tier miners, that sort of thing, whose exploration pipelines generally are pretty thin. So we feel like we're in a good place. The markets are terrible at the moment, as everyone here knows. We hope that we'll get a bit of relief on that at some stage. The other thing I'd remind people of are the historically very low levels of inventories, particularly on base metals. I think we've got a much better 12 months ahead of us than the 6 months that we've just put behind us. But from a market perspective, there we go.
Okay, thanks very much, gents. I'll remind anybody to send any questions through to me, Peter at nwrcommunications.com.au, and I'll make sure they go to you and the team at DART. James, the next quarter or so for shareholders to look forward to.
Yep. Thanks very much, Pete.
Thanks very much, everyone, for coming along.
Okay, cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.